Hey guys, what's up? It's Krim, and today let's talk a little bit about the corruption vendor that's been put in, and the big question in everyone's mind, which corruptions am I going to buy to fill my corruption budget? So your corruption budget, let's talk about that first. This is defined as your resistance on your cloak, which is 77 for me at the moment. If you've been keeping up to date, you'll be at 77 as well. Plus anything you get from essences, which is a max of 10. Plus however much corruption you feel comfortable running. In my case, I like running with just under 59. So my max corruption is 77 plus 10 plus 59, which makes 146 corruption. So you can see here in the top left of my screen how I filled my corruption budget up. And this video is gonna be a bit of a guide for Outlaw Rogues as to how you can fill your corruption budget up. Now the max corruption resistance we're going to be at is going to be the week of September 8th if you are in the US, or the week of September 9th if you're in EU. And it's going to be 125 on the cloak, plus 10 from any essences, plus whatever you feel comfortable with. Now I'll come back to an example of a max corruption resist setup right at the end, but this may vary for you. Now what this corruption vendor has done mostly is it's changed our gearing strategy from looking for pieces with good corruptions to looking for high item level pieces with good stats that we can then corrupt ourselves later. So without further ado, let's jump straight into what we want to corrupt. Now the corruption you are going to want to be running may depend on the content you do, whether that's raiding and then single target, AoE or Mythic Plus for example. But I'll start off with a couple of generic corruptions that are going to be good no matter what you do. So the first one you want to try and get is Lash of the Void. This comes off the Raden weapon in the Ny'Alotha raid, and it's honestly unlikely we'll be able to purchase this off the vendor. The next thing you might want to get is the Strike Through corruption, which increases the damage you deal with crits, and the Severe corruption, which increases your critical strike by a certain percentage, also known as the crit amp. Now you want to try and balance these two as best you can. And if you've balanced those and need to go for a certain one, always favor Strike Through over the crit amp. Now thirdly, I just want to mention Gushing Wounds. This has received a nerf in the last couple of days, but it's still a good corruption if you can get it on a high item level piece, because this scales with item level. Now honestly, the only time this may be worth it is probably if you have Mythic Carapace or Mythic N'Zoth items, because they scale up to 485. Other than that, it's probably not worth it running over Strike Through and Severe. Now speaking of things that scale with item level and leading us nicely into the next topic of single target corruptions, Infinite Stars. So Infinite Stars sims really well and scales with item level, so you think you get stronger the better gear we get. However, there are reasons this is not the case, and I've mentioned this in a couple of my boss videos. Firstly, the amount of targets really has a bad effect on Infinite Stars. The more targets you have, the less valuable Infinite Stars is going to be, because the procs are going to alternate between those targets and take far longer to stack up, which leads to the next point, fight length. The longer the fight goes on, the better Infinite Stars will be. However, as we get further and further into the tier, fights are bound to be shorter. And thirdly, unfortunately, Infinite Stars is complete RNG. You may or may not get procs, you may get a load, you may get a little, you don't know. It is just 100% RNG, just like our next corruption, unfortunately, which is a Mind Flay or Twisted Appendage corruption. This also scales with item level like Infinite Stars and Gushing Wounds, and unfortunately is also complete RNG. It is more reliable though than Infinite Stars, because it changes targets depending on what you are attacking, and is probably the best corruption if you want to try and cheese some high logs. And thirdly, the aforementioned Gushing Wounds is still a good single target corruption, but doesn't really scale well with multiple targets or proc more or anything like that. So Strike Through and Severe corruptions and Lash of the Void are probably going to be your best bet for single target, with maybe a couple of tendies mixed in. Now for AoE, once again, Lash of the Void is quality. It gets even better on AoE than it does on single target. Also, Gushing Wound may be worth, as I mentioned before, if you have a high item level piece, but honestly only probably run 1 or maybe 2 at a push. Then Twilight Devastation is a super interesting one and very good on AoE. However, it is also unreliable because it procs randomly. It is super strong in Mythic Plus though, however I would probably only run 3 tiers of Twilight Dev and fill up the rest of my budget with Strike Through and the severe corruptions. Now I just want to touch on the Ineffable Truth corruption. This is only 12 corruption and reduces your cooldowns by 30% sometimes. Now, unfortunately for Outlaw, we don't have many big cooldowns that really increase our DPS. We got Adrenaline Rush, which is an attack speed steroid and some energy regen, but it's honestly not really all that great. However, one limiting factor in Outlaw is Blade Flurry charges, and this is where Ineffable Truth may come in handy. If you have extended periods of long AoE, and I'm talking about multiple minutes long, so say for example the first part of Motherload where you're just pulling trash on trash on trash on trash before you go onto killing the rest of the bosses. This is where one Ineffable Truth may come in handy, but honestly outside of that I wouldn't bother. So to summarize, I would try to go for the Lash of the Void corruption from Raden in the Ny'Alotha raid. If you haven't, it is worth trying to get these. You'll not be able to buy them off the vendor. And then filling out the rest of your budget depending on the content you do, with mostly Strike Through and Severe. Now let's go over a quick build that I've came up with for max corruption once we get there. Now this is going to be an AoE build because most Outlaw players play Mythic Plus. Now for this I would obviously go with a double Lash to start with, as you can see, and then a tier 3 Twilight Devastation because it is really strong in Mythic Plus. Now we will assume that we have one Mythic Carapace or N'Zoth item, and we're going to put a gushing wound on that. Then we're going to fill up the rest of the budget with 4 tiers of Strike Through and 3 tiers of the severe corruption. Now I just want to point out that if you want to run 3 tiers of either severe or Strike Through, to never run a tier 1 and a tier 2 together if you can help it. This is because it gives the same amp as a tier 3 would do, but costs 5 extra corruption. So try to avoid this if you can. However, if this is how it fits into your budget or this is what you have, then that's perfectly fine as well. I hope you guys have received some clarity on what to shoot for at the corruption vendor. If you have any questions or think I'm wrong about anything, make sure to let me know in the comments and I'll try to reply when I can. Alternatively, come and find me on my stream at twitch.tv/crimwow. If you enjoyed the video or would like to see more guides, have a look at my channel, hit subscribe, tell all of your friends, you know the deal. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.